Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Wicked Art. It's Wicked here, and it's our Digital Wednesday. And I thought I'd show you all how to kind of concept and painterly paint out an environment scene for something that you might be working on or you're planning out a scene. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make separate layers. Now, the way that environments work is the closer they are, the darker they are, the farther away they are, the more brighter they are. So what I'm doing is creating separate layers. I'm starting with a foreground. I'm starting with a couple middle layers. And what I'm doing is I'm just basically using the lasso tool, and I'm just kind of shaping out the side of my desert mountains. So this is a good way to kind of plan and see like how your shapes are going to look, whether they're intriguing and got a good silhouette. And what I'm doing is I'm just making each layer lighter gray as I go back. So for that purpose, um, you create each layer separately as well, just because it allows you to add distance between them with some ambient fog, um, and also allows you to work separately so you don't mess with the images that are in front. So depending on how many things you have in the background and how much of them are going to bleed and blend together, you're just going to get lighter and lighter gray as you go. Now once I have that in place, my next step that I'm going to do is kind of put like a fog, like a distance fog in between each layer. So what I do is I just go down between the foreground and that next layer and I create a fog. I do the same thing all the way through each layer, just adding a new fog layer, and I just label it fog 1, 2, 3, and so forth. I forgot to put one in the foreground, so I'm going to go back and kind of add that. But yeah, it'll just cause some distance for you to have that cool little nice ambient effect from there. The next thing I'm doing is I'm just kind of picking a random sky right now. I started with a sunset, but you'll see I'll change that later. So I'm just using a gradient tool to just kind of put something in to have something to base my colors off of. And then to start working on the ground, what I do is I just hit command on that layer I'm working on and I just fill it in with a blank color. Since we're doing kind of desert, I did kind of a sandy thing. And then I kind of just drop down the color to a darker color and just kind of put in some shadows just to make it interesting. I may not even stick with them. I might change it to something else. But yeah, it just kind of gives it some texture to it just for the moment. And then what I do is I hit command on the next layer and I just fill it in again, and then start thinking about shadows for like how much light's being exposed, and then the kind of cracks and things that fill in on the layers. So what that does is it gives you a little bit of dimension to your rocks and stuff. And obviously, if you study rocks and things like that and practice, you'll get better at that. But I'm just kind of putting in like this is the brightest, closest thing that we'll see. So there's going to be very little shadows. So I'm just kind of mixing in like a dark brown with some gray in there, just to have some breakup. Because remember, it's just a concept. We're not going for super duper detailed like almost the level where it's like photo bash. I mean, we're just kind of painterly going in there and filling in what it is that we need for each one. And then what I do is just kind of pick another darker shade of like an orangey color and go in and add some shadow into some of the darker areas. Again, it's heavily exposed to light, so I'm definitely not putting too much detail in it. And then once that's settled, and I have everything in place that I want as far as cracks, shapes, and forms, I just go to the next middle ground layer and do the same thing again. Hit command, pick maybe a little bit of a darker tone sand. You could technically go brighter if you wanted to, but I wanted to kind of phase in with the fog. So I just kind of get that sandy color again. And then what I'm doing is just taking a brush and adding in like the shadow base. So you don't want it to just stay flat, right? You want it to have some surface area, different changes in directions in sunlight. So what I'm doing is just kind of tracing that outline. And again, we're staying loose, we're staying sketchy, so it's not overly detailed and stuff like that. But what it does, you can see it starts adding form to our rocks and desert base there. So I just kind of went over it and added an even darker shadow, the ones that are like closer to the edge of the thing that's in front of it. So this front mountain section is going to have an overcast shadow. And I just simply went in there and just darken that up. And then again, I just move down to the next layer, make sure it's all selected, fill it in with something a little bit darker, more of a peachy pink color. But the shadows are going to be a little bit more in depth here, just because we're going to have that huge cast from the closest mountain. All that stuff trickles down and goes back. Again, practicing the lighting and the shading and shadow, and just really seeing, like, look up pictures. I mean, again, everybody has a stigma against looking up references. There's nothing wrong with looking up a reference to see how something functions, right? So there's no shame in looking to see how shadows cast on a mountain, right? So I'm just going in and kind of darkening this further back layer. I'm going to leave the front one alone, just because there should be even darker as we go back into the crevices back there. So I'm just kind of like jetting some lines out too. And what that'll do is allow for some vague shapes of, like, a mountain deformity in the rocks and stuff like that. Again, I'm not going to add a bunch of cracks and divots, but it's just to sell the idea. And then, of course, I do the same thing along the front end of this one. It's not quite as dark as the one that's in the back, but it's dark enough to sell the point of these different faces and changes in the rocks and the crevices and stuff. So again, you just then go down to your next layer, which is like the background. I just call it background one, but then I made this one a little bit brighter because it's further. Now, since it's farther back, we are going to see shadows and stuff like that, but it's going to be less and less detailed just because we're not as close to it. So you can honestly just kind of judge for yourself. Now, what I did was I wanted to leave the top end exposed to the light and just kind of fill everything in, and then just kind of work backwards. You'll see me do it later, but right now I'm just kind of laying out the shapes with the shadows in the areas that I know that are going to be darker, and so that I just can come back later with maybe a different shade and fill that in. So I'm just kind of coming in and making sure that's nice and dark, well defined. And I'm using what's called a flat chisel brush. You can find these things and download them just about anywhere. But you could use a lighter brush tone, just something that has the opacity taken down on it. And then I'm going on to that last layer. And again, it's even further back. And it's just going to be even less defined. So again, I'm just really going backwards this time. I'm highlighting the areas that I know are going to be the most exposed to the sunlight. So I'm just kind of hitting up those edges. And then I'm going to go back with a darker tone, and you'll see I'll start getting those deeper shadows. But right now I'm just working with the lighter colors and just kind of blending those in first and seeing what areas I have left after filling those in. And then that will cause me to have a better understanding of, like, how deep each of the shadows need to go. So I'm just going in now with that darker color and hitting up those edges, and really just trying to work in, different divots and cracks, just to show that the mountain's not just flat, you know. But yeah, I mean, that's really about it. Once you put that in, I kind of just went back and found like a pinker tone and went in on this middle foreground area and just wanted to get some differences and changes in there. And again, it's a concept, so you're supposed to go in there and play around and have fun with it and learn from it and see what things you can make mistakes and learn from in the future. But other than that, again, this is just a concept piece. So what I did now is I just found like a grass brush and went back to the foreground. And because it's a desert, we want kind of a golden, orangey kind of color to the grass. And I'm just simply painting that in there. I'm going over it twice. The grass brush that I found is kind of a opacity based one, so you have to kind of hit it up twice if you want to get some of the shadows in there. But again, it's just a basic concept. We're not going for anything crazy or fancy. So yeah, once I was done with that, I went to a super dark color just so I had the grass closest to us. And you always want that to be the darkest. So I just kind of touched it up with some highlights and hit it in. But that's really about it for a desert scene. I think I switched it to more of a blue sky just so it looked better. And then I just kind of found a cloud brush, which you don't have to have. You can just use like a chisel thing again and trying to chisel those clouds in. But I mean, yeah, I mean, that's really about it. With the clouds, to give it some more definition, I put some shadow underneath it with a darker version of it. And then that completed my scene. So you can see it's nothing super amazing, but it's enough to convey what it is, the scene your character might be going into next. And then if you wanted to, and somebody picked it and said, yeah, let's go with that one, then you would go in and go back and add as much detail as you need to. But that's going to do it for today. Thank you for watching. I really hope you enjoyed. Thank you to all the new subscribers. Thank you everyone who continues to subscribe. Let me know what you think down in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one, all right? Bye.